Who would like to start? There's no reason why we need to start at this end. Shall we go to the other end? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm still kind of reeling from John Bird's speech, really. He was like a cross between Roland Rat and Alexei Sale, I thought. My name's Tim Fisher. I've been a social worker for 20 years. Most recently, I was principal social worker in East Sussex. I worked for a long time in Camden in London. I've always been interested. I've always thought that the community has the answers. And so I've always tried to do that kind of social work, which is attuned to the community and asking them for the solutions. So I'm interested in this idea of breaking down the silos, because I've moved out of statutory social work and into kinship, which is a national organisation many of you all know, that work with, represent, campaign for, value kinship carers that are supporting children in the community every day. Here to talk about kinship today.
Hi, I'm Emily Frith. I'm Chief Executive of Adoption UK. We're the UK's leading adoption charity. We're about supporting children and young people who are unable to grow up with their birth parents. We also provide services in Scotland around kinship care and for long-term foster carers, including therapeutic services. So the main things that we do are we inform and advise, empowering people with the information they need to navigate the system. We connect people and build their support networks. We provide individual support, whether that's peer-to-peer support or therapeutic support. And finally, we campaign for a better system. And we're all about making sure that people understand that adoption or living away from your birth family is a lifelong experience, and it has a real impact on you. And so we're here today to talk about the fact if that you're adopted or you've grown up in kinship care, then you may have very similar experiences to young people who've grown up in the care system, and that we need to treat all these young people as people who can fulfill their potential but have barriers in the way that we need to get rid of. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cathy Ashley, and I'm Chief Executive of the national charity Family Rights Group. So we work to enable children to live safely within their families and strengthen the family and community ties of children who can't remain at home. And there were a couple of things that I wanted to raise. I do really want to find out who's in the audience, because I'm keen to do that, so I'm not going to give up on that. But the number of things I wanted to raise was that, firstly, when you look at the situation of families in our involved with the child welfare system, we see often mothers who've been victims of domestic abuse who are then blamed for failing to protect and at risk of their own children going into care. We see a situation in which too often learning disabilities and are not recognised, but are then the reason why parents are at risk of their children being removed. And I could go on, but critically, what we see is this intersectionality that ends up with care experienced young people, particularly at risk of their children being removed. And too often, when we have discussions about the care system, there tends to be a focus as if it's either children or parents, it's either kinship or it's parents, it's either adopters. And actually, the interface between that is significant, and we see that on our advice service, we see that in our parents panel, the kinship panel, in our lifelong links work all the time. And too often, what turns out is that young parents whose children are at risk of removal, who are themselves care experienced, stop being seen as children, young people in their own right. And the variation across the country in the risk of their children being removed is disgraceful, and it's particularly, recent figures show, affects those who are of dual heritage, and we don't explore that by far as much as we should do.
Oh, you've got your own. I think it works, yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Shepherd, and I work at AFCA Cymru, with the Association of Fostering, Kinship and Adoption in Wales. And we work across the breadth of permanency planning for children to support those children achieve the absolute best outcomes that they can have in life. My specialism within AFCA Cymru is kinship care, and I am absolutely passionate about the value of kinship care and the value of kinship families. We know that when children can't grow up safely with their birth parents, our next thought should be their kinship network, but often that next thought is too late. We should be thinking about a child's kinship network from the very moment that any service starts working with them. It's absolutely crucial in order to do this that we need to change the culture around kinship care. And I'd like to share 3 exciting projects, as briefly as I can in my introduction, that we've been doing in Wales to kind of support this. So firstly, we've developed and delivered a unique preparation course for both current and potential kinship carers that was funded by Welsh Government and freely available to all current and potential kinship carers across Wales. This course has been instrumental in changing the outcomes for children. That's feedback that we've received from CMCAFS Cymru about changing outcomes in court. The training isn't solely focused on fostering, but instead explores all it means to be a kinship carer. And we've been able to do that by developing it with kinship carers in Wales. It supports both current and potential kinship carers to understand the care system, the legal options available, and crucially provides a space where their experiences and emotions are truly heard and respected. Because if we can get it right for the carers, then they can be that one positive person that we've been hearing so much about across the last 2 days, and they can get it right for the children. Secondly, we were tasked by Welsh Government to improve the understanding of special guardianship orders across Wales and drive consistency in practice across Wales for how special guardianship families are supported. Because if special guardianship orders are used as a vehicle to avoid the care system or as a route out of that system, then special guardianship families need to be properly supported. So that work has led to every special guardian in Wales now having access to a card which they can carry with them, which explains their role, because no child in Wales should have to sit in a hospital waiting room or other public space while they listen to their special guardian explaining their life history and arguing for their right to make decisions on their behalf. So we've done that. That's complemented by an e-learning for all educational staff in Wales to better understand special guardianship families and the needs of children being raised in those arrangements so they can better support those children in their school environments. We've got a Welsh Government all-Wales special guardianship order support plan and transfer protocol now ensuring that the support needs of special guardianship families are robustly assessed and addressed. And we've got a national guide for the offer of special guardianship order support. Most recently, that I was talking about yesterday, we've produced 2 practice guides, and these are to support both workers and foster carers talk about special guardianship orders in a way that is clear, honest, and builds and maintains trust, to support informed, but really most importantly, unpressured decisions about special guardianship that promotes a child's best interests. It's not right for every child and every family, it is right for some, and it's about getting that balance correct. And then finally, what we're currently working on at the moment, what I'm really excited about, is we're working hard to update the Good Practice Guide for the assessment and support of kinship foster carers in Wales on behalf of Foster Wales, which is our umbrella organisation in Wales that brings together all local authority fostering services. Like all of our work, this guide is absolutely rooted in extensive consultation and collaboration, and I've had the absolute pleasure of listening to local authority practitioners from all regions in Wales, kinship carers, care experienced children growing up in kinship families, parents, and really the value of that, I think what we've achieved so far, just in the consultation phase, has been enormous. We've brought these people together, talking about what needs to change in the same spaces. And we've seen team managers, practitioners go back and already start making the changes that are needed before we've even put pen to paper to get that guide out there. And I think that sort of speaks to what's been so important. It's about networks. We've heard a lot about not working in silos. I'm delighted to be sitting next to Cathy because my relationship with Cathy and the Family Rights Group role in facilitating the Kinship Care Alliance has been absolutely instrumental to this. We've formed a network in the Kinship Care Alliance subgroup in Wales of passionate organisations and individuals that are now all working together to achieve these aims. We've sort of through that developed a group of really committed kinship carers who've got a real interest in research and policy, so we consult with those all the time. And that has led to having these relationships now that are key to achieving real change, because we believe that if we can have easy to access, and that's easy to access for everybody, children, kinship carers, practitioners, practical tools that are co-produced, that are grounded in these real lives and supported by these networks to get that message out there, then we can drive and achieve positive change.
Hello everybody, I'm Dr. Simon Hammond. I'm an academic and researcher at the University of East Anglia. I'm also an associate prof at a local National Health Foundation trust. I'm here today as a bit of a rogue entry, I think, if I'm honest with you, but I come to you today as a former residential worker with a passion in increasing the accessibility, quality and consistency of life story work for teens with care experience. Just briefly, I envisage life story work on a continuum with the kind of high intensity, trauma focused, kind of professional-led stuff at one end, and I think I situate myself very much at the other end, where we're talking here about the everyday experiences, the everyday magic of the young people we work with and support. So the anecdotes, the lived experiences, those little bits of banter and interpersonal relationships we have with children and young people. So as a former residential worker, I was very aware that when we go out on kind of trips and just in the car, the kind of the banter, the fun, the sharing of memories and anecdotes and all those sort of things almost are slipping through my fingers. And yet when I go back to the home and I'd say, look, you know, we're back at 10:30, we went to a local park and played Monkeys in the Mist, which for anyone who didn't grow up in my local town is kind of hide and seek in the dark. I'm having to explain to them why I'm late, what the risk assessment was and everything else, and there wasn't really a way to capture, yeah, but Kieran and Curtis did this, and so-and-so did this, and those sorts of memories. So I've been working with Sarah and colleagues for about the last 3 or 4 years, really, on a programme of research to improve the quality, consistency and accessibility of what we're calling low-intensity life story work, although we won't call it that because it's horrendous, but essentially improving the ways in which across the care sector we can kind of hold on to those everyday moments and those everyday magics, really. So we're halfway through already the second big chunk of work, which has been funded by the National Institute for Health and Social Care Research, and we're working to co-produce a set of kind of guidance and resources to really allow kind of the adults around working with and supporting children and young people in care to kind of grab hold of those everyday moments and store them in a way which provides artifacts. I think for many of you in the room, I always talk about, imagine telling a story to someone you haven't met about a place they've never been and people they've never met. That's really quite a hard kind of narrative task to do, and to be able to do that in itself without anecdotes, without other people, shared relationships and artifacts is really bloody hard. And actually, as we saw in many speeches today, that sense of identity, that sense of home and belonging and telling of one's story is such a huge facet of kind of mental health and well-being. So yeah, that's kind of really what I'm here for.
That's brilliant. Thank you all very much for introducing yourselves and outlining your work. We are going to come to the audience for any questions. If we don't have questions in the audience, I've got a long list, so I'll go through those. We do need to use the mics. I know we've got a lot less in the room than we have on any of the other sessions, but the mics really help with the filming. So I'm going to ask Bethany and Claire, and would anybody like to ask any of our panellists a question? No, nothing from the room. I wonder if, oh yeah, fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Annette Turner. I'm the virtual school head teacher in Southend. My question is probably a little bit rogue because I know we're all sort of promoting the same thing. I'm really concerned about the lack of funding now for the Adoption and Special Guardianship Fund. It concerns me that we do a lot of talking and we're pledging, but actually when we're seeing visible cuts and the impact that that's going to have on our children, I'm not sure of the solution and what we can do. So over to you guys with the magic wand.
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah,
one?
whoever wishes to.
Yeah, we're obviously really angry about the changes to the fund. For those of you who don't know, this is for every child who has access to the Special Guardianship, Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund. Their funding has been cut by 40% from 5,000 to 3,000. They have taken away the match funding that was available to local authorities, and they have taken away their funding for specialist assessments. This is obviously morally unacceptable. Those children are children who've had the most difficult start in life. They've often had several foster homes. They've lost their birth families at an early age. 8 out of 10 will have experienced abuse or neglect as a small child. This therapy is vital for making sure that they can access education, build relationships with friends and with family, and be able to thrive. And it's but also an economic short-sighted decision, because this will have an impact on those young people's ability to engage in education, to get into the workplace. Adopted young people are double the rate of NEET as their peers. So we are making representations to government. We are encouraging people to write to their MPs. And what we're calling for is the Secretary of State to convene the sector, including charities who work in adoption and special guardianship, together to think about a permanent fund that would make sure that every young person who's unable to grow up with their birth parents has the support that they need.
We'll come to Cathy. I'm just going to clarify, this is England only. So for those in the audience who are thinking, what is this fund? It's an England-specific fund.
So I completely agree with Emily, and on the way here I was messaging various MPs and trying to get parliamentary questions put down on both written questions. There's education questions on Monday. It was raised in Parliament today. So Family Rights Group, as I say, works to enable children to live safely within their families where possible. And as part of that, we both have a kinship panel. We were one of the founders of the Kinship Care Alliance, and we're also the secretariat to the all-party parliamentary group on kinship care. But I do want to make a wider point about it, because we were successful in getting the fund to be extended to children who are in kinship care under child arrangements or special guardianship order allowance, but only if they had previously been in the care system. So there's a lot of children in kinship care who don't qualify for it. But I would also add that our mental health system for children is in crisis. And actually, although I will passionately, lobby in relation to trying to ensure that money is put into the Adoption Special Guardianship Fund, actually we've got to be much more radical in terms of what's required, because whether children are living with their parents or whether they're in care, whether they're reunified to their parents or adopted, actually they need that support from the get-go, and it shouldn't be determined on whether they happen to meet particular criteria. And I just also want to add that one of the things that Family Rights Group has pioneered is an approach called Lifelong Links, which is designed to build rather than break relationships for children in the care system. And whilst it's critical that there is therapeutic support and other counselling in place, it's also the case that the way the system, as we have, is set up in terms of our care system, we create damage to children by actually removing them from some of the most important relationships that they have in life when we end up moving children away from their communities, away from their schoolmates, then repeatedly doing it and not placing an emphasis on the value of relationships. So if you're interested in lifelong links, I could happily speak about that for ages, but I do think we have to look at the system itself and the way in itself it can cause significant damage, as well as having specific programs and funds to try and support individual children.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel?
Yeah, if you look at the root of the word kinship, it's kindness. And I've spoken to quite a few kinship carers over the last little while since that announcement came out, and they're really worried. And some of them say, and whether they've got a legal order or whether they're informal carer, Cathy makes that important point, they're in the same position, and what they often say is that they offer that kindness, they step up, they step forward, but other people and support services step back, and the kinship carer can often feel like the invisible one in this system where we're talking about different positions and silos. And I think what I've really taken from this conference and this experience over the last 2 days are people's journeys. And I think it's Matthew at the back, isn't it? I'm putting him on the spot, so he's on his phone. But but yesterday,
Matthew.
Yesterday, the panel, the panel that you're on, and how like a lot of the journeys and the experiences that we've listened to have been hearing from care experience adults, and it was just like how the experiences were just layered on, weren't they, as we went through that sweep of people talking yesterday. And it does seem that there's one voice calling for continuity, care, commitment. Ray Jones said it yesterday. And we've got that. There's an army of people out there in our community, they're kinship carers, that and foster carers that are really doing their best. And we're not supporting that, we're not valuing it. Kinship, the organisation, commissioned a piece of research that found that kinship care, the value of kinship care to our country year on year is 4.3 billion. So I think that's really important. But yeah, Matthew, that was magic yesterday. Thank you. Respect.
Thanks
for
very
that.
much.
Yeah.
I think I've spent my last 2 days talking to a lot of people who, like me, have got lived experience, all different ages, and we're all from different walks of life. But I keep coming back to the same conversation that there's a thread that goes through all of us, a common thread that goes through all of us. And it's things like we seem to connect. We seem to know what needs to happen to change, and I think that we are empowered more now than we've ever been in terms of support, visibility, listening to what we've got to say, and I think that group of us is getting bigger and growing stronger, and I think it's us with lived experience that have got the answers.
Thanks, Matthew. I want to say thank you. Matthew is a trustee of the Fostering Network and helps to guide our work and make sure that I am always 100% centred on lived experience of those that have been in the care system. So I think we had another question. Hi.
I just want to second that, because I'm a special guardian kinship carer, and my children's adoption support fund's just been cut off, so they've had a break in therapy just when it was really starting to dig, and that's like ripping the plaster off, leaving the wound open, not knowing if we're going to go back to it. So now all the applications got to go in, now we've got to wait for that to be okayed, so then they have to rebuild the trust and start the whole process again. It's ridiculous, this happens every year. And secondly, my children were taken into care in Ceredigion in Wales, and I hope this doesn't happen anymore, I brought them over to England, and I would get lovely emails through offering me all sorts of courses in Ceredigion, you know, at 9 in the morning. Obviously couldn't go to any of them. So the support, if you move out of area, just for the first 3 years, stays with the place of origin, which means I spent 3 years totally on my own with 3 kids, not knowing what the hell I was doing, quite frankly. I had no training and nowhere to go for support, really. And I just wonder if that is still happening or if that can be transferred from day one.
Over to you, panel.
So I don't know whether that is still happening, but yeah, I would say that, I can't speak for Ceredigion in particular, but yes, this is what we hear from kinship carers, isn't it?
That is the setup, basically, that the authority that is initially responsible for the child is basically, that's the first 3 years. Yeah.
But what I can say is that we're trying hard to change that. So the All Wales Special Guardianship Order support plan that we've got addresses that topic specifically. It looks at whether or not arrangements can be made with the local service, with the area in which the kinship carer lives, whether there can be reciprocal arrangements that don't have to wait until the end of that 3-year period, because it shouldn't be about where you live. It should be about supporting kinship carers to do the best they can for the child in their care. So we are trying to change that practice, and we'll continue doing that.
And that's in Wales, so same applies in England? Okay. So there is
but there's no reason why, authorities couldn't. It's one thing an authority being responsible. It's another them not actually then liaising with where you're living to try and make that, feasible for you, practical.
And I think that's a real live question, because all local authorities we know have got to set out their stall now. They've got to publish their local offer in England. And so some of these questions are really particularly pertinent, and we're hopeful that things and that practices can change. We're really realistic as well on that, but I think asking those questions is particularly important at the moment, as every local authority has to publish their kinship offer and how they support. Yeah, thank you for that.
I think the bigger issue, and I don't know if the panel would agree, but local authorities don't necessarily do the best job of working together. So I can think of an example. Again, it was in Wales, a kinship carer moved from Wales to the south of England. That we contacted that local authority and asked them if they would be kind enough to provide the support and the supervision and meet the fostering regulations. And they said yes for X amount. And we had to say, we're really sorry, we can't get that approved anywhere. So we sent social workers from Swansea to Southend, I think it was, regularly to do the work that could have been done locally. And that happens day in, day out, everywhere right now across the UK, because we have not in any way got to a place where we can see each other as collaborators rather than competition, even in local authorities. Those costing models are not really designed for that type of interaction and collaboration.
And I think that's particularly the case when you're talking about local authorities working with the NHS or with schools. I think when you're trying to get people to work across systems, then the barriers go up, and there's arguments about budgets and unfortunately a lot of short-term thinking where we're not seeing the potential benefit of investing now to support a child in the future.
Yeah, and I think it's actually not necessarily a competitive dynamic, it's like a defensive one. A defence around resources. And I think the thing that John Bird was talking about, us working in the crisis of homelessness, working in the crisis of poverty, I think that really resonates for those of us that are working in these systems. And like there's often the phrase is like the system's broken, but I've heard it's said that actually the system isn't broken, the system's kind of working fine, it's running on rails, it's producing these outcomes that we don't want, and what we really need to do is kind of re-gear it. But I know there is a senior manager from a local authority there in the front row, Andrew. I don't
You're
know.
Great at shouting people out in the audience, isn't it? Like, over to you.
But you've always been really good at collaborating and trying to move to develop good practice in the local authorities you've worked with.
That's right, Bethany. Move over.
Yeah. What's your secret?
Hi everybody. So I'm Andrew Borwick-Fox. I'm the head of children in care and leaving care at Suffolk County Council. I think where it works, it's usually it's trust and good faith, and I think you're right. It's about defensiveness, and I think often people in the profession wherever they are, when they're being asked to do things for others, it's about scarceness of resources, about how people are in their own workloads and things like that. But it makes such a difference when people do reach across and where you do build that trust and those relationships. And I can think of times where we've worked with other local authorities when children are placed outside of an area, and it really does make a difference. And I think the positivity and goodwill that you generate between professionals when you do that as well is a really important thing. So it's a difficult nut to crack because everything is so fragmented, but I think it's something we've just got to keep pushing at. And I think if the more you do it yourself, the more you lead in that way, the more other people will feel the confidence to do it as well. So,
and collaborating with people with lived experience, that's key, isn't it? We've seen that today, a massive theme.
Yeah.
I mean, kinship, the organisation, 50% of the organisation have lived experience of kinship care. I think many other organisations have value that, and I think that's really key to come up with a solution. Jenny,
Thank you. Any other questions from the room? I have to bring this to a close in 9 minutes? No, 1:45, isn't it? So 9 minutes. Welcome.
So I'm Ben. I'm Children and Young Persons National Lead from the Charity Victim Support. But 14 months ago, I became a solo dad through adoption. So I had a little boy dropped off at 2 days old through foster to adopt. And I'm just keen to hear views, really, on my limited understanding is that's typically babies that foster to adopt happens with. And I suppose, does it, should it, or could it be a pathway for older children? And I suppose, what could that look like?
I'll jump in if that's okay. I think it can work quite well for older children who've been with a foster carer for a long time and they choose to go down the adoption route. Foster to adopt is a fantastic way of transferring the risk onto a parent rather than the child. What often happens through traditional adoption is that the child has to move home a lot of different times before they finally have their adoptive family. So a young boy who we work with had 14 different homes before he was adopted. So all the risk was on him, all the pain and separation was on him. Through foster to adopt, what happens is a parent or parents become foster carers and they support a child while the process is going through of whether or not they will be having a route to adoption. So there's all the risk that that child might go back to their birth family, and that would be the right thing for that child. So that the foster carer in that case will be looking after that child for a short time. But if the decision is made that they can't go back to their birth parents, then they will have already had that relationship with the family and they won't have that risk. So I think it can be really powerful. And in Northern Ireland, it's the norm. It's called concurrent care there. And I think it is really important. Obviously, they are still foster carers if it's through foster to adopt. So it doesn't mean that they've got any more right to be an adoptive parent than somebody else, than any other foster carer who's looking after the child, until such point as the courts decide that adoption is right for that child. And that's really important. It's not about prioritising the adoptive, the kind of foster carer who might adopt at that point. I think it is the way forward.
Can I just raise one caveat with it? And I feel like I keep doing this as a sort of, but I'm very optimistic about the way that the world can be. But my caveat is, and it's particularly young parents, but particularly care experienced young parents, is that if the baby has gone into care under voluntary accommodation, then that parent will not have had access to independent legal advice to really understand the full ramifications of that. And although it's true that there isn't a presumption in favour of the doctor, the reality is that once a baby is with the prospective adopter, it does change the balance in the way in which that parent has to prove, basically, as opposed to the other way around. And that is an area that we have long argued needs to change, so that actually parents in that situation particularly given that they are often, as you say, you're talking days after a baby's been born, and in that situation, the mother might still actually be in hospital or not in a position to be able to advocate for themselves.
It's really tricky stuff, isn't it? When you think about those two perspectives and children's rights, adults' rights, the world that we are all working in and the conversations that we're having have been, incredible over the past few days. Is there anybody else on the panel or any other questions before we close? I feel like I'd like to come to Simon, if that's okay, because when Simon says he's rogue, basically there was a realization that there wasn't much at the conference in relation to life story work for children. So Simon was invited, and I said, come and join my panel, because we're talking about rights and kinship and adoption. I wonder if you would like to add anything to this conversation or share anything more, particularly around your current recruitment of foster carers for your research?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. As Sarah said, we're working together on the kind of Limitless 2 project, and we're, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, trying to sort of improve accessibility, consistency and quality of life story that's available. And I guess just say we are kind of looking for local authorities to get involved with us. We are developing a set of resources, and the whole project is kind of a lived experience thread throughout and informing it, and very much kind of co-producing resources and guidance. And the guidance that would be kind of freely available afterwards as well. So if you are interested in taking part in, I'll use the word groundbreaking research with lived experience at its heart, please do physically grab me, because I'm quite shy, by the cardy, that'll be great, and give me a shout. So we are trying to active looking for local authorities to kind of pilot the thing, so it's not just a case of kind of the researchers taking away stuff, it is us giving these kind of evidence-based resources that haven't really been done before, to local authority, foster carers, kinship foster carers, residential workers, any of those kind of colleagues in the room, and saying, tell us why it works, tell us why it's rubbish, help us make it less rubbish. And yeah, to the point of, I think one of the other panels earlier, making sure that it can work for each child and care in their different situations, really very relationship focused, not trauma focused at all, very much about the kind of lived everyday experiences and very future focusing. So if that's up your street, please grab me by the cardigan.
Thank you, Simon. Life story work, really, really important for everybody, irrelevant of their setting, whether it be residential, kinship, wherever they are. I'm going to draw us to a close now, because we have 15 minutes to have a break, and then everybody needs to get back into the hall for 4 o'clock. Can I just ask for a big round of applause for our panel before we finish? Thank you all very much. And they won't be rushing off, so if anybody wishes to speak to them or ask them any other questions, please do so after in the coffee break. Thank you, everyone.